drink that water. You're nervous, aren't you? You're a traitor.
You're a traitor.
You're a traitor, bitch.
Please.
Okay. Aw. Whoa. You off.
Hey y'all, it's Renegade, and it's time to spill more Reali-Tea in another Reali-Tea retrospective. As always, this series will take a deep dive at some of the most popular shows that have finished here in 2024. We'll start with my spoiler-free review to give anyone who hasn't seen the show a taste of just what you're in for. Then we'll get into an episode-by-episode review of the most needed to be talked about moments. So let's get some discussion going in the comments below, y'all.
In today's recap, we return once again to the Scottish Highlands as an all-star cast of reality TV's biggest names enter the castle to play our newest favorite game of treachery, deceit, and murder. Let me introduce you all to the Traitors US Season 2. Now, for those of you who have seen some of my videos will know that I'm a huge fan of this franchise, as it easily became my favorite reality series of last year. While the first US season was an amazing ride of watching one of my favorite reality TV strategists of all time dominate the game from start to finish, one of its biggest criticisms was the half-celeb, half-civilian casting. So, when the full cast for this season was announced and expanded to only reality TV legends, including our favorite cast members from Survivor, Big Brother, The Challenge, The Real Housewives, and more, I literally lost my damn mind. This easily became the most hyped TV event for me of the year, and it's barely even spring, by the way. But does the season live up to all of its extremely high expectations? Let's discuss in my spoiler-free review. So the game of the Traitors has not changed too much from its initial first season, and it's very much so a game of the faithful versus the traitors. And because of this, there will always be a level of ambiguity at play here that really gives advantage to the traitors. However, much like it was noted in the UK2 video, this season did come with some huge improvements to the challenges, where they did now have shields up for grabs during every mission. I will say the structure works much better in UK2 than it does here, as there are points in this season, especially in the mid-game, where a lot of the criticisms of the actual rules of the show are really fully on display. And it does feel like there are certain twists that are added to the game that mostly just are fail-safes to make sure we hit a certain number of episodes as well. There is part of me that feels like had the game started in the same way that UK2 did, where we had 4 traitors from the beginning, a lot of the things would have been resolved as far as these issues go. But no one can really deny that that's just a small criticism in what is mostly a pretty fun format. So I'll give them an A- just based on a slightly flawed implementation. Now when it comes to the cast, this will go down as the cast of the decade. There are so many stars here, it's impossible to have... There are just so many stars here, it's impossible to not have at least 1 or 2 favorites going into this. We have legendary strategy gamers like Sandra, Parvati, Dan, and Janelle, top-tier challengers like CT and Johnny Bananas, dramatic housewives like Larsa, Phaedra, and Tamra, other stars from huge shows like RuPaul's Drag Race, The Bachelor, and Love Island, and we even get a member of the UK Parliament here. Like, this is just an insane group of individuals to have in one mansion, and even though the boot order isn't completely ideal, there's enough star power here that even the endgame episodes are still full of fun and drama. It's also intriguing to watch a lot of players who are new to the world of competition reality shows take on their first strategic game, and how they match up against the veterans. I think I'm slightly biased in this area, just being excited to have so many of these people on my screens again, but I do think this is one of the greatest collection of stars we've ever seen, and for that, Traitors US Season 2 will receive my first ever A+ ranking. Now, if you've seen any of my reality retrospectives here, y'all know I typically hate the editing of a show, but you can tell the editors of the Traitors have really learned a lot from their first season. While I still hate some of the cliffhangers, they are really well done, and the waits in between these episodes have just been excruciating, so they're doing their job. For having 22 cast members, I feel like they've done a rather good job at making sure everyone gets some screen time, and it helps we kind of already know most of these people, so we keep to the drama and not have to worry too much about anyone's sob stories. I think out of everything, this has been the portion of the show that has shocked me the most, and the editors are great at creating tension, even in the most obvious situations. And while everything goes off the rails around the midway point, I think the show does a great job of explaining most of the outcomes without making things too obvious. I am very pleased with the growth of the editing here, giving it a very well-deserved A. So, overall, The Traitors US 2 was by far the most hyped TV show I have gotten into in a long time, and I have to say for the most part, things lived up to expectations. While again, the boot order was not the greatest in my eyes, I don't think we were ever left hanging dry because when one star would leave, another one would be waiting in the wings to take the spotlight. And while there are definitely some evolutions in strategy, some obviously more successful than others. I think the strength in this season comes from the fun of its characters, who lead us on quite the journey from beginning to end. If season 1 taught us exactly how to play, I think season 2 will go down in history for the exact opposite reasons. But I'm still giving the Traitors US2 a very solid. So, now that you know what the show is and what my thoughts are, let's get into the real tea, y'all. If you haven't seen this show, first off, what are you doing? Stop right now and go binge it immediately. Feel free to use the chapter guide to go to specific episodes below. So our season officially begins as all of our players drive up to the castle and get to know each other outside. After Alan introduces them, we begin to learn more about some of the previous history of some of our players that will likely be important during our time in the castle, including Parvati noting on the car ride up that she doesn't want to see Sandra, but lucky for her, Sandra is obviously there as well, and she's here to destroy. There is absolutely contention over who is the Queen of Survivor, or I would say Queen of the Traitors now, but within the game's first few minutes, with Peppermint looking on as the mediator, we watch as Sandra raises out her hand to Parvati in the sign of good faith. And I'm like, okay, well, this is probably not going to end well for them, but at least they're starting out well. CT is also not shocked to see Bananas or Trishelle, but they kind of had bad blood before, so as members of the challenge, and as people who. But they are members of the challenge who have to change their opinions of players season after season, so they are ready to work with the devils that they know versus the devils they don't. Dan's last interaction with Janelle was when he voted out of Big Brother 14, but we also see them initially being cordial, much like Parvati and Sandra, as these gamers are clearly veterans and know better than to start the game with an obvious enemy. Meanwhile, Phaedra is aware of all of this, and she notes there are a lot of winners from a lot of reality TV shows. As she starts to crush on CT, they go over who's who on the wall, pointing out Larsa and Marcus's relationship as well as a few of the big gamers in the cast, making it clear that they are both much more knowledgeable of who has come to play this year, unlike last season's cast, which seems to read that the Faithfuls could be a lot smarter this time around. We get to the game's first roundtable, and Alan selects our Traitors, and we have Dan Giesling, winner of Big Brother 10 and runner-up of Big Brother 14, and Phaedra, one of the real housewives of Atlanta. Now, the twist, the two traitors will select a third to join them, while also deciding who will be the first murder. Dan says he was born to be a traitor, and he's ready to take all the sheep down in hunting season, while Phaedra says she's excited to be joining the secret society of the traitors and is going to be queen of the castle. Lots of these queens fighting for their crown here. Uh-oh. We got Janelle, who is pissed off because she is not a traitor, and she's terrified, meaning she will likely do whatever it takes to get a shield. And I kind of agree, because I'd love to see Janelle play as a traitor, since she's always kind of been on the good side every season, and I'm always Team Janelle, so I would love to see Janelle as a traitor. Meanwhile, Camera says it'll be easy to spot the traitors, but does not do a good job of initially doing it, and I don't think a lot of these people realize how hard playing these games really are. Right off the bat, we do get some initial accusations at the table, where Janelle points out that there was a slight hesitation around her when Alan was walking, and then all of a sudden John changed his breathing, which he blamed it on his asthma, although there is contention as to whether or not he actually has asthma. Meanwhile, Larsa says that she noticed Alan shifting his jacket, and she heard some ruffling to her left. And who is sitting next to Larsa but Parvati, who instantly claps back at her ready to take no mess. While I'm bummed Parvati already has some sus on her, it's not the first time she started the game on her back foot, so it seems like just business as usual for her. All of this initial drama takes us to our very first mission, and together the 22 contestants will work together to build a giant beacon and set it alight in the middle of a lock, by gathering and rearranging the puzzle pieces for the beacon first. To guide the group, a replica of the puzzle was also hidden among bottles scattered along the lock shore. In order to set it ablaze, all players must have left the water. However, they are first tied up to a pole and need to untangle themselves first, deciding whether to go first for a shield, which there are 2 in the lock and 1 in the land, or start the puzzle and help someone untie themselves first. Completing the mission within 40 minutes would earn the group $30,000 for their group pot. Now, as we mentioned here earlier, shields are now up for grabs in these missions, making them finally worth something here. And we see, as And we see this being a great decision because already there's drama right from the jump, as players have to decide whether or not, after untying themselves, whether to help the group or help themselves. Janelle is one of the first people to untie herself, and she goes for the shield immediately on land, which I'm like, let's go, girl. But immediately catches eyes from everybody else for possibly being selfish. Meanwhile, while the teams are out in the water, CT, Deontay, Marcus, and Maxim are in a boat, but CT and Deontay immediately abandon ship to go get their own shields as well. Now, this group seems to have a really hard time getting pieces in the water, and they're really disorganized until Shrey manages to find the map in one of the bottles, and everybody else starts bringing the pieces back to the dock. It's complete chaos trying to put this puzzle together. There's just so many voices, but ultimately they do manage to succeed and get the $30,000. I'll be honest, something tells me they gave this one to them, but it's not my money, so whatever. Now, again, Janelle catches a lot of sus from a lot of players, namely Ikensu, for immediately running for the shield. However, Dan is leaning towards recruiting her because of their knowledge of the game. Or he's thinking of maybe Parvati, who he says is the female version of him. He's also looking at Sandra for being a ruthless stone-cold killer. Sandra is also considered being a recruited traitor for being a ruthless stone-cold killer. Saying the biggest point of contention for the evening, Peppermint and Trishelle have a bit of a misunderstanding. Peppermint says she hopes she stays so she could wear a lot of her nice clothes that she brought. Trishelle agrees that she also brought some nice fashion and wants to show them off, and if she dies, then it's because Peppermint is a traitor. Obviously, Trishelle is joking, but Peppermint does have this large reaction to it, and Trishelle, being Trishelle, does nothing but gossip about it like it was a relevant interaction. We end our premiere episode of The Traitors as they meet each other in the turret for the first time. Dan and Phaedra are equally shocked to see each other, and it does feel like they have an awkwardness to them versus immediately having some sort of chemistry. Upon discussing, it seems like Dan brings up the majority of the names, so they agree upon Janelle, Larsa, Parvati, or Sandra becoming their third, ultimately deciding on to be revealed next episode. Parvati, which I'm immediately happy about because she was my draft pick. Now, even though Dan admits he's a little worried what she's capable of once she has the power, he's very excited to be working hand in hand here with Parvati. As an added twist, Parvati will not learn the identity of the other traitors until the next secret turret meeting. However, there's still a murder needed to kick off the game's events, and the shortlist is between Kevin, Johnny Bananas, or Peppermint. Dan believes their gameplay should be to cause confusion, like by killing Kevin, no one would have any idea what he did. However, he does start to feel like he can push a little bit harder due to his gameplay history, and Phaedra's not being a game player, so he drops Johnny Bananas because he feels he is capable of finding traitors. But Phaedra is a little worried about that since they do need his strength in missions, but she does also stand that it's a game. Dan also suggests Peppermint because she's aware of everybody's resumes and may need to be taken out since she will eventually figure out who the traitors are. The next morning, one by one, everybody enters breakfast, revealing that the first murder is indeed Johnny Bananas, which makes CT worried that the challengers are being targeted. At the same time, Trishelle brings up the conversation the night before with Peppermint, and Peppermint makes a big scene about it, saying that the only way Peppermint will be murdering Trishelle is by her fierce looks, but everyone still finds Peppermint's reactions pretty sus. Meanwhile, John's breathing at the first roundtable is still being talked about because people feel like he started breathing harder after Alan walked by him, likely because he was tapped as a traitor. Obviously, John is just asthmatic, which makes Asthma the true traitor here. As the newest traitor, Parvati is taking the day to try to figure out who the rest of her fellow traitors are, while Sandra is trying to figure out if she could fully trust Parvati. This takes us to our second mission, where the group of 21 contestants are split into 3 groups, each with their own marked paths. They'll encounter 3 questions about their fellow contestants based on previously completed questionnaires, with each possible option associated with a scarecrow that has a key on their neck. They had to guess the correct option, carry the scarecrow to a locked box, and attempt to open it with the scarecrow's key. If they succeeded, they would be eventually guided to a field of gold full of scarecrows, which they disassembled to try to find 10 hidden gold coins. Additionally, 3 shields were hidden in the scarecrows. The group had 30 minutes to complete the entire mission and win up to $20,000. Now we learn here based on the answers from the questionnaires that Marcus is seen as the biggest leader and the most influential. Peppermint is seen as the most popular player, although everybody thinks it's actually Deontay first. and Dan is the player that needs to speak up more, which is not a great sign for how Dan is currently playing. Yellow gets to the Scarecrows first, followed by the blue team, and finally the red team. There doesn't seem to be any organization to determine if they should go for the money first or the shields, so everyone kind of splits up to do their own thing. Dan is determined to get some attention off of him, so he goes for a shield in an attempt to make himself seem like a nervous faithful. A lot of people are going for the shields though, and when time is called, they actually miss 2 gold bars in the Scarecrows, meaning $16,000 out of the $20,000 available was added to the pot. Upon returning to the castle, it seems like the vote is between John and Peppermint, as there seems to be inconsistencies in John's asthma story. However, Peppermint keeps making slip-ups, accidentally saying Trishelle is concerned with not banishing a traitor instead of a faithful. Trishelle is still discussing the Peppermint story, and it seems like Max and Sheree are openly in disagreement that they think it's Peppermint, but will the push against John be enough? The discussion continues in the roundtable, where everything is pointed at Peppermint. As it seems like this point, everybody has been influenced by Trishelle. However, some of the housewives are not completely convinced, as Tamara really grills John about his breathing problems. With the majority seemingly moving in that direction, Sheree decides to join the majority in casting their votes for Peppermint, while Max and MJ are the only outliers who vote for John. And in the Circle of Truth, it's revealed that Peppermint is just a faithful who is really bad at defending herself, and she sadly becomes the first player banished from the game. I have to say this first murder was absolutely a gut punch, as I'm a huge fan of Peppermint. She has such a light to her, and she just brightens up any space, and I was living for the drag race representation on a strategy show. While really not the best at these types of games, I'm hoping that Peppermint's appearance opens the door to more queens to do the show in the future, and I will live for the day that I will get to see Alyssa Edwards, Bianca Del Rio, or Bob the Drag Queen become a traitor. Now, following the banishment, everyone seems really disappointed in taking out Peppermint. Deontay especially seems very hurt. And let's blame all of this on Trishelle because she's horrible and I knew she was going to ruin all the good things for me in this game, so ugh. Max says to Trishelle exactly what I was thinking, which causes Trishelle to get emotional and walk out of the room. The talk seems to shift to how quiet everybody in the room was, just following the herd and allowing Peppermint to be taken out, which makes everyone realize that those who are not trying to take the lead in any discussions currently are most likely the most suspicious. And things continue to get bad for Dan when Marcus openly calls Dan out for being silent later that night. However, it is time for slumber and time for the traitors to officially become a complete trio. Barbie finally gets to meet the players who recruited her, and we end the episode with Dan and Phaedra removing their hoods, revealing themselves to Parvati. And with that, the Traitors trio has officially become complete.
Our third episode begins as our murderous trio discuss their first murder together. Parvati throws out Deontay because he's the most capable of getting his shield in the missions, and this is the first time he's been vulnerable. Dan considers Marcus because he was voted the most influential, and because he has Larsa as well, and possibly because Dan was just called out by Marcus earlier that night. Phaedra names Janelle as very well liked, well connected, and very influential, putting her on the short list as well. But at breakfast, Larsa is heartbroken as Marcus becomes the traitor's next victim, which was a smart move, but an obvious move for Dan since, again, Marcus just called him out the night before. Larsa holds a toast to Marcus, and she's now determined to hunt down all of the traitors. Maxim is starting to come off a little sus as well, because he's not really giving any opinions on why Marcus was murdered, and this comes off as very sus to Deontay. Janelle and Larsa, on the meantime, are getting sus of the men, feeling like Johnny Bananas and Marcus were taken out by another man who was intimidated by his strength. And with attention still swirling around Dan, Parvati is starting to realize that defending her fellow traitor ally might not be in her best interest since it puts attention on her as well, but she is very loyal to Dan at this point, which makes her very conflicted. We get to our third mission, where the 20 contestants have 15 minutes to find gold hidden among the various graves, crypts, and tombs in the cemetery at night. To find the gold, the contestants needed to use tools scattered around the cemetery to break things open. The gold would only be counted if it was placed into a wheelbarrow at the cemetery's entrance. To make things more difficult, searchlights traversed across the cemetery, and any contestant caught in them were immediately eliminated from the game. Any gold they were carrying is taken out of the game as well. Only 9 players are allowed to search at a time, so the rest of the players were a substitute in case players are caught and eliminated from the game. 3 shields are also hidden somewhere in the cemetery, up for grabs. Now during the challenge, it takes over 10 minutes, and everyone seems really disorganized. CT is seen as the best leader, but when he's taken out, Bergie attempts to try to take control, and initially no one really listens to him. However, Bergie eventually gets the confidence to speak up and figures out the pattern of the lights, and they start to make some real good progress. Although Bergie gets caught, he gets them with enough of a lead that everyone starts to feel comfortable going for the shields. Hammer gets the first one, followed by Peter, leaving just one left. And it seems like Janelle is going to get there first, but Ikensu kind of pushes her way in as well to try to get it herself, causing the two to struggle over it. Eventually, Janelle overpowers Ikensu, getting her second shield of the game and causing a rift between the two women. Now, the best part about all this drama is that both of them have a very different version about what happens here in the situation, with Ikensu saying that it was taken from her and Janelle pushed her out of the way, while Janelle confirms that she got to the shield first, fair and square. They do grab most of the gold, finishing with 19,500 out of the possible 20k. Back at the castle, everyone is going in different directions as everyone has their own suspects. Deontay is still suspicious of Maxim, Kevin is suspicious of Janelle, but him and Peter come up with an idea to vote for each other in an attempt to stay in the game, which is kind of very harebrained at this point, but also kind of smart. See how they sell it. And at the same time, Harvey warns Dan that his name has been coming up a lot. Who knows what's going to happen as we enter our second roundtable banishment, as Dan is the first to have to defend himself, saying he doesn't want to throw out a name until he's absolutely certain he is right, to which MJ feels like Dan is playing way too safe and trying to fly under the radar. Deontay defends Dan, saying Dan is just quiet and that's just how he is, but other people have changed up since the first time he's talked to them, and he names Maxim as his suspect. Sandra jumps in, asking why Maxim was laughing at the last roundtable. Maxim deflects immediately by bringing up the conversation between Ikensu and Janelle, which causes the two women to bring up their disagreement, but CT calls his deflection as sus, which brings the attention back to Maxim. Maxim tries to turn it on to CT, but it doesn't seem like it's working to get the sus off of him. However, Larsa is determined to get her revenge for Marcus, saying that her and Maxim aren't gamers, but Dan is. Now the votes come in, and they are literally all over the place. Sheree votes for Janelle, finding her to be either a traitor or a selfish faithful. Larsa and MJ cast their votes for Dan as expected. Kevin and Peter enact their plan to vote for each other, which is again weird because neither man brings this up to each other or says anything about this at roundtable. So again, it's a smart idea with terrible execution that it feels like nobody believes. Parvati also tosses a vote at Kevin to try to get his name out there. Maxim, and for some strange reason Phaedra, cast a vote for Ikensu after, for what Phaedra says, inciting an estrogen riot with Janelle. But although the other 5 names are thrown out, it is Maxim who receives 10 votes from the majority and is banished, revealing himself to be a faithful and scoring another point for the traitors. Following the banishment, Deontay is not in a good place, as he is really down that he basically got his friend eliminated from the game, and he questions if he could really handle the situation anymore. However, all of the attention turns to the murder, as we learn there will be no official turret meeting tonight, and instead the traitors must murder in plain sight, using a poison chalice from the library to deliver a slow-acting poison to one of the faithful. It's very difficult for all 3 of the traitors to meet, given they kind of run in different circles, so Parvati takes it upon herself to handle the task while conferring with Dan who they should target. Dan kind of wants to go for Sheree, and although Parvati says this would piss Phaedra off, he still kind of wants to do it. John is also seen as an obvious faithful target, while MJ has been creeping on Dan, making him want to take her out as well. Parvati initially tries to take out Sheree, but it's clear from the stink eye that Phaedra gives her that she will not allow Sheree to die, so Parvati decides to try a new approach in another room. And as the episode ends, and as time begins to count down, we don't know who is going to get poisoned. But in the final moments, Parvati assures us that she has found her victim, and the Black Widow strikes again. We return to the final moments of the evening at the start of this episode, and we learn that Parvati tried to poison MJ, but she was not making things easy. So with only a little bit of time left, Parvati finally claims her victim, getting a slightly inebriated Ikensu to sip from her glass. While it wasn't necessarily her intended target, at least Parvati was able to complete the murder, but we aren't really sure at this moment if Dan or Phaedra even know if someone has been poisoned as everyone leaves for the night. And we're also not sure if this is even really good because Ikensu is someone who clearly has a great relationship with Dan and Parvati. So while it is a good thing that another faithful will be down, but it's not necessarily a good thing that it's Ikensu who turns out to be that specific faithful. Learn that Deontay has chosen to quit the game. I roll here. But at breakfast, Janelle explains the state of the game. The house is divided between the Bravo housewives, Larsa, MJ, Phaedra, Sheree, and Tamara, the gamers, CT, Dan, Parvati, and Sandra, and the obvious faithful, Bergie, John, Kevin, Peter, and Trishelle. Funny that they don't include Trishelle in the gamers, but strategically up to this point, Trishelle really hasn't done anything but call out poor Peppermint, so I see the reasoning why. Now, the traitors are at breakfast first, where Dan and Phaedra are informed by Parvati that it is Ikensu who drank from the glass. Phaedra begins to wonder if this will look bad on her since she just voted for Ikensu, and we see Dan note that he is going to use this for later, thinking he might need to use Parvati to take a shot at Phaedra. And the plot begins to thicken, y'all. Everyone is shocked, including the traitors, when everyone makes it to breakfast the next morning, making Dan and Phaedra wonder if Parvati slipped up. But everything gets clarified by Alan that someone was indeed poisoned and will be dying very soon, and in fact, their mission will be a slow walk to that player's final resting place. Before the mission, everyone is wondering how the murder in plain sight twist works, and they could have just watched Traitors UK, but it's okay. Meanwhile, it seems like Parvati got away with the murder as no one seems to blame her, and also her seed from the previous roundtable has started to work as the housewives are now switched on to Kevin, mostly because he is annoying them, but he is an actor, so he does have the capacity to be a traitor. Game's fourth mission has the contestants taking a long and slow walk to the murdered contestant's final resting place. Along the way, they're given a series of questions hinting at who was safe, allowing those who were the correct answers to enter the carriage instead of walking with the procession, and eliminating them from consideration. The three contestants left then stepped in the coffins at the burial plot with the group voting on who they believe was murdered. If the majority could correctly guess which contestant was murdered, they earned $20,000 for the prize pot. Janelle, Peter, and Tamara have shields, so they cannot be poisoned. The first question reveals that players born in the same year as each other are safe, which allows Dan and Kevin, and Larsa and Sandra to relieve the procession. There's a pretty lousy moment when Sandra doesn't believe her and Larsa are the same age, and I'm kind of laughing at you there, Sandra. I love you so much. The next question saves CT and Trishelle as the two people Bananas trusts the most, and the final question saves Bergie, John, Phaedra, and Sheree, leaving Ikensu, MJ, and Parvati as our three death possibilities. Ikensu is being so over the top, saying she could feel the poison, and I'm glad she's at least going out here in her last breath being hilarious. The group unanimously believes, however, that it is MJ that is likely to be the death as Parvati is suspicious and a traitor, while Ikensu is kinda useless, so why would they kill her? They give all their black roses to MJ. Dan and Phaedra, knowing this, pick the wrong answers to keep their secrets, but when it turns out that the murderer is actually Ikensu, everybody is shocked, feeling like the traitors just made a really dumb murder decision. Unless MJ is actually a traitor, some people question. Before that evening's roundtable, Parvati sows some seeds of doubt that a housewife could be a traitor since none of them are leaving. Janelle spreads Larsa's name as the one who held the toast to Marcus, thinking that that's how the poisoning occurred. Meanwhile, Larsa is still on her kick that it's an alpha male, setting her sights on CT. Janelle calls this out at the roundtable, and Larsa lashes out at Janelle, wondering why she would kill her own boyfriend. Larsa throws out her alpha theory at CT, to which Kevin says she doesn't believe it. MJ says that she does believe it, as it could apply to Kevin instead, to which Kevin counters if he was a killer, he would have killed MJ first because she is so annoying. The rest of the housewives seem like they are on the Kevin train, so Tamara agrees, feeling like because he's an actor, he has the capacity to perform. Parvati uses this as the opportunity to tie in the performance aspect into her theory that the housewives also have the ability to be traitors, which sets off Phaedra against Parvati, but it's clear the damage has already been done. So, once again, the votes are all over the place. Sheree casts a rogue vote for John because she needs more time to make her decision. Peter votes for MJ, thinking it has to be her since she wasn't murdered earlier in the coffins, and Larsa casts her vote for CT as expected. The rest of the housewives do not back Larsa, however, and instead cast their 4 votes against Kevin, along with John. But The other 8 votes from the Gamers Clique and Bergie and Kevin is enough to get the majority of the votes onto Larsa, and she's banished, revealing she is the 3rd faithful they have eliminated by a vote in a row. Following the vote, the housewives are definitely the talk of the house, with everyone figuring that one of them has to be a traitor just based on sheer probability, and they are not deterred after learning that Larsa was not the one. However, the housewives use Larsa's elimination to bond closer together, and they start to suss Janelle for pushing Larsa so hard. Meanwhile, CT and Trichelle's relationship gets a small highlight as it continues to grow, as Trichelle is really valuing CT's growth, and she's starting to feel like she could really rely on him. This all leads up to the turret meeting, where the tension between the traitors is at an all-time high. It's clear at this point there's definitely a division between Dan and Parvati, as the gamers are on one side and Phaedra as the lone housewife is on the other. Phaedra calls Parvati out for her roundtable comment, saying no one even likes Parvati and everyone thinks she's a traitor. Phaedra then warns both Parvati and Dan they better watch who they're trying to turn on, and the episode ends with the traitors teetering on the edge of destruction. At the start of our 5th episode, Parvati tries to justify her actions that she called out the housewives because she needed to get Larsa out. Phaedra accepts Parvati's apology, and they decide to move on. But it seems like neither of these ladies are going to really forget this. As a peace offering, Parvati says Phaedra can make the sole decision tonight. Phaedra wants someone who is going to be a surprise to everyone and to cause confusion, feeling her decision is between Sandra, the strategist, or Tamra, as another housewife who everybody is thinking of. The next morning, Peter wakes up ready to get a traitor. So far at this point, Peter has some interesting strategies he's tried to employ, again, including that mutual vote against Kevin that really went nowhere, but he's determined to come up with something. So initially, I just want to pat his little bachelor head and just be like, there, child. Let the others do the thinking for you. But it's also kind of intriguing to watch people from other franchises that don't really have strategy in them and seeing what strategy they come up with as well. So I'm going to give Peter one last chance here. Kevin gets some attention this episode as he tries his hand at strategy as well too, deciding this is the day he's going to accuse Janelle, since he feels every banishment. Actually, maybe it's Kevin who should be letting others do the thinking here, but, he is a sexy mofo, even if he is slightly annoying. So just stop targeting Janelle, Kevin. On a good note, it does seem like Janelle is also on to Dan, and the stage is officially set for our first rivalry rematch as the Big Brother legends have each other in their crosshairs. At our 5th mission, the group of 13 contestants were split into 3 pairs of runners who ran around the castle grounds with a marked map, and a group of 7 that stayed behind in the castle. With a time limit of 20 minutes, the runners located various stations where they heard a bird call after blowing their whistles. They then imitated this call back to the castle group via radios. The castle group then had to search among various birds to find the one that made the right call, as well as where it could be found, with only one guess per bird call. Each correct bird identified, with a maximum of 6, netted 2,500, along with the bird in the walled garden that would net the runners that mimicked its shield if the castle group guessed it correctly. Now, as they're picking teams, there is definitely a fight for who will have a chance to get the shield, and ultimately it seems like those that are the most vocal about wanting it get the opportunity. Sandra is sad that there's no opportunity inside for those that hate to run, and I'm feeling either, Sandra. Now, this challenge is hilarious. It set me cackling. This is up for nomination for one of the best challenges of the year for sure. Hearing the ridiculous bird calls and then all the players running around the castle repeating the noise, I literally could not stop cackling forever. Oh my god, stop that, Trishelle. Now, this is such a brilliant idea, and whoever designed this challenge deserves a medal. Now, Kevin and Sheree decide to go for the shield first, but they are so lost and cannot find it. While all this is going on, Sichi and Phaedra are just flirting with each other, and it's just really kind of cute that I'm living in a world where Sichi and Phaedra could possibly become a couple. While all this is going on as well, Peter actually comes up with a brilliant plan, as everyone in the castle would likely assume him and Janelle would go for the shield first, so they could create a blanket of protection for the rest of the runners, because if they don't reveal which of them won the shield, then the traitors don't know specifically who has it, and it also means that the traitors are likely players in the castle. When all is said and done, they get $10,000 out of a possible $15,000, while Bergie and Trishelle are the actual holders of the shield. Janelle is the one to voice the strategy that no one will be telling who the shield holders are when Alan asks who has the shield, which Dan notes in confessional that he will use this info against her as well too, hoping it plays into the rumors that Janelle is selfish. Now Peter puts the next phase of his plan into motion, deciding to leak information to his suspects that him and Janelle are the ones holding the shields. Peter tells CT, Dan, and Parvati in private, and I'm starting to take back my earlier comments about Peter because this plan is pretty amazing. Turns into Dan versus Janelle officially as Janelle starts to push Jan. Janelle is pushing very hard, however, and it's giving some people like MJ and Sheree red flags because it's the same thing that happened last round of Larsa. Dan is still refusing to say names, which is playing into Janelle's hand, but it seems like Dan has more allies, including his traitor partner Parvati, so who will win the rematch? However, in a stunning twist, although not so stunning because it was revealed in news articles prior to the show beginning, we learn that there is a secret mystery 20-second guest that will be entering the game late, and now is the time for it to happen. And it's revealed that it is Kate Chastain from Below Deck and season 1 of the Traitors. Yes, all hail Queen Kate. So happy to have Kate here. All hail Queen Kate. So happy to have Kate here. And she joins us to cast a vote with everyone tonight at the round table, but she cannot be voted for herself, which is like amazing karma. Let's give Kate a fair chance to get into this game. Fourth banishment starts with Kevin and his argument against Janelle that she has led the charge and been wrong several times in this game. To which Bergie defends Janelle, saying that she wouldn't be throwing out so many names if she was a traitor, because it would be a bad look. Janelle gets pushed into naming her 3 traitors targets, and she calls out Dan, CT, and Sandra as her possibilities. This turns both CT and Sandra on, and they turn against Janelle. There's a funny moment where Kevin is explaining himself and Kate is asking MJ what his name is. Kevin gets really annoyed at Kate for talking while he is talking and not listening to his argument, which turns Kate immediately off. Love this. Peter seems to shift the conversation back to a helpful direction when he puts the target back on Dan, and Trishelle chimes in that he's not enacting like a faithful at this moment because he doesn't put out names. Dan decides to name Janelle in response to her accusations against him, which isn't really naming a name since it's the person who's sussing you. The votes are read one by one, and it's back and forth between Jan and Janelle. And while this is all happening, I'm having the sad realization that we are actually going to be losing a huge star, and it's not even a halfway point. While Janelle receives support from the obvious faithfuls, Bergie, John, Peter, and Trishelle, the housewives and the gamers join together to banish my queen, Janelle. And sadly, Janelle becomes the 9th faithful in a row to be eliminated from the game, and this one hurts because Janelle, Parvati, and Sandra are my ladies, and I was praying for a world where they would somehow all succeed, and it sucks that Janelle is taken it out by Dan yet again, but Janelle will always be a legend, and she proves that whenever she's on our screens, she's going to deliver, and I love that if Janelle had to go out, that she went out guns blazing. Hold on one moment. I need to go get some water. I'm a little thirsty. After banishment, Kate's getting accustomed to her life back in the castle, and I'm loving her being back. Peter reveals his alliance of Bergie, John, and Kevin that he has set up CT, Dan, and Parvati, and we wonder going into the turret will our strategists pick up on this ruse. This feels like the most pivotal game with so much writing on this murder. Dan confesses that tonight he needs to be in control of the murder, and he's on the hot seat, and it's the only way for him to turn his game around. Parvati and Phaedra joke that he needs to say a name, but then realize when Dan doesn't say anything that he could be planning on shifting the target onto one of them. Now, before they decide, Dan and Parvati both reveal that they were told by Peter that he has the shield, which makes Parvati immediately feel Peter is lying since she cannot figure out why he would tell both her and Dan this information. Parvati wants to do the smart move and murder someone who stayed inside the castle during the challenge, which I agree would have been the best move. And she suggests John as the target since now nobody is believing the Asma story anymore. However, we learn later that Dan didn't even really hear Parvati, which I believe because he was kind of so in his head at this moment, but he believes this moment not only is Peter not that strategic, but he has to make a move against Bergie tonight, otherwise his game is doomed. Dan continues to push it, and while Parvati and Phaedra are hesitant that they ultimately agree to murder Bergie, All the viewers are collectively head desking this move because it just did not seem very smart to take this huge risk when there were others who were definitely bigger targets than Bergie of all people, and others that were safer targets as well. I have to say, the preview for this next episode is setting up a huge betrayal, with Dan getting ready to name his first name of the game, and I cannot wait to witness the backlash of the first shielded murder in the Traitors, you ask. The next morning, Peter's plan comes to complete fruition as it turns out the Traitors' huge gamble did not pay off, as Dan and Parvati are shocked when Bertie walks into the room revealing he had the shield. And this turns out to be a huge blunder, as it feels like this is again the huge turning point in the game. The Faithfuls now have so much information to work with, as it confirms to Peter one of the people he told his shield lie to is definitely a traitor, which means CT, Dan, and Parvati are now in the hot seat, and of those three, he is most sus of Dan and Parvati. They both do their best to talk their way out of it, but Peter is definitely convinced it's one or the other, making Phaedra feel good that she has nowhere even close to the conversation. The sixth mission, where the 13 contestants have to make their way to an incomplete giant catapult, collecting catapult pieces along the way to fully assemble it. Once complete, they then have to fire a golden cannonball and make sure it hit the distant target to win $20,000. They have a total of 1 hour to complete the mission, and along the route, shield cannonballs could also be collected, and each contestant holding these cannonballs would be eligible to fire them at the target as well. The contestant whose shield cannonball comes the closest to the target bullseye will then win a shield. Kind of hilarious, they wait for Kate to come back before they do this super long journey challenge. Although it takes them a really long time, they make it to the top and complete everything within 30 seconds left, winning the challenge and securing $20,000. It then comes down to Parvati, Peter, Sandra, Sheree, and Trishelle to compete for who gets the shield, and with the closest target, it's Sheree who secures safety for the night. On the car ride home, Peter is riding with Dan, Parvati, and Trishelle, and there is definitely tension between Peter and the two traitors, as everyone in the car is very aware of the situation. However, back at the mansion, Peter stops Parvati from entering a group conversation with Bertie, John, Peter, and Trishelle, making it clear that those five faithful have an alliance of trust that cannot be broken. Although this is not a great look for Peter, Sandra confirms that she's onto her survivor rival Parvati. Meanwhile, Dan tries one last visit to CT, Peter, and Trishelle, saying he's going to name a name tonight, and he needs them to keep an open mind, making us wonder, who is Dan about to throw under the bus? By one at the round table, Dan eliminates everyone from contention for being the traitor, starting with those who have never been suspected, and those who have never had an unexplained votes. And this leads him down to either Parvati or Phaedra. And he names Phaedra, which is like, okay, Dan, big swing, but damn, like, why are you calling out Phaedra? She wasn't doing nothing. I was fully expecting you to pull out Parvati's name because she's the big target, but wow, wow, wow. It's not a bad argument, but it's also like, why is this being brought up now and not even before this up to this point? It just seems out of left field. Dan starts to build his argument, first saying Phaedra has a weird vote in Ekansu and her having weird breakfast reactions, but ultimately finding her the most sus because everyone likes her so no one will ever bring up her name. However, no one seems to really buy this argument at all, and not only Phaedra disputes most of his points, but Kate chimes in as well to defend her. Parvati attempts to say she was fooled by Dan, but Peter is speaking up for the group to stay strong and to not buy what Parvati is selling, all the more making Peter think he's going to be murdered tonight. When it comes down to the vote, Dan receives literally every vote but his own, which goes to Phaedra, as well as Peter's, who refuses to let the group forget about Parvati. And in the circle of truth, Dan reveals to the group they have officially unmasked their first traitor, causing the faithful to erupt into cheers, knowing they have finally banished successfully. Gotta say, I am a big fan of Dan from back in the day, but there was definitely something here that was missing. Not sure if he just took a little bit too much time out of retirement and hasn't played any maybe social games lately. Like maybe he didn't even try to play like a little Among Us on his stream before he started to come out here. But I am just really kind of sad that of all the things that happened here, that Dan kind of started what will initially be a downfall for some of my favorite players in the game. Not only now has Parvati had sus on her since the start, but now Trishelle very cleverly reads into Dan's argument against Phaedra, believing that Dan waited so long to say a name that meant that he was only going to say the name of a traitor so he could get the heat off of his tail. which means in one round again, our traitors went from an almost flawless game to a castle crumbling around them. Peter's attempting to have a celebration meeting with his alliance of Berkey, John, Kevin, and Trishelle when Parvati catches them again, calling them all out and setting the stage for a Survivor versus the Bachelor showdown. Now, Now we end the episode in the turret as Alan lets Parvati and Phaedra know their options. With the traitors down to 2, they have the option to either murder another faithful or attempt to seduce someone onto their side as a third. Realizing they need the numbers, Parvati takes control and decides she needs to make a bold move in order to survive any longer, deciding, for the second week in a row, to swing for the fences, choosing to seduce her arch rival nemesis, Peter. Will it work? Peter thinks over the pros and cons, deciding ultimately to decline the invitation to become a traitor, saying he just cannot betray his team. Parvati and Phaedra are joined by Alan, who tells them the news, making Parvati realize she is hanging on by a thread. But she's also determined to rise from the ashes like the phoenix she is, no matter how bleak things seem. Gotta say, I love Parvati when she is playing from the bottom. She never gives up. And I think that's honestly when she plays her best. So I'm honestly not too worried, but I'm very worried also as well too because things do not look good. Now the next morning, everyone shows up to breakfast, making everyone realize that someone was likely recruited, but Peter doesn't initially say anything about the failed seduction. Parvati tends to use it to her advantage, and Peter publicly says maybe he was wrong about Parvati, but we all know they are still pitted against each other secretly. Peter has another quick meeting with his alliance and he reveals to them all that they attempted to recruit him, but he declined it. Phaedra stumbles upon the Peter pals and is dismissed, which gives Trishelle the opportunity to bring up her suspicions on Phaedra. At the same time, Phaedra takes Peter's dismissal back to the Bravo girls and Sandra, and we get the most amazing gif ever of MJ attempting to barge in and then back out in those giant fucking jeans. Like, what is she wearing? However, Sandra literally breaks the game, realizing that it is truly just a numbers game for them now, especially if they've all been isolated from the Peter Pals. In order for any of them to survive, even as a faithful, they need the alliance to be broken, since the alliance will never vote for someone within it. And if there is a traitor within that group, then they will control the entire game if their voting bloc gets the majority at the round table. Next mission, the 12 remaining contestants are split into 6 pairs and tasked with carrying $24,000 worth of gold through the woods. While making their way through the woods, each pair would encounter trivia or a puzzle question with 2 options that they could pick from. They then have to follow a rope course based on their choice and have one member attempt to pick up a scroll along the way. If they are correct, they can continue on, but if they're wrong, they would be stuck in a bog or a booby trap. The gold would only be banked if at least one member of each pair completed the course successfully. In addition, the pair that banked their gold the fastest would win the shields. The pairs are $10,000 being held by Peter and Trishelle, who feel like they're the best team, $7,000 held by John and Parvati, $5,000 held by Berkey and Sheree, $1,500 held by Kate and MJ, $1,000 held by Kevin and Sandra, and $500 taken by CT and Phaedra. Kind of hilarious that Peter literally botches the first question, is eliminated, and Bergie does the same thing, but at least he looked good in them sweatpants on the way out. Question 2 stumps a lot of the teams, as the sun seems like the most logical given like it would be the most symmetrical pattern, but the moon is actually the center of the table, eliminating Sheree and the $3,000 from the competition entirely, while also snagging CT and MJ. Meanwhile, I love that Parvati is literally sacrificing John to each of the traps. I would do the same thing, Queen. The third question is what phrase is written in the kitchen? Didn't even realize there was one. And all of ladies traveling solo also didn't realize it as they all get it incorrect, meaning Trishelle in the $10,000 bag, Kate in the $1,500 bag, and Phaedra in the $500 bag are out, leaving only 2 pairs in John and Parvati, and Kevin and Sandra remaining, which is kind of cute because Parvati is attempting to use the moment to bond with John as well. It becomes a race to the finish as both pairs get the last question correct. It comes down to Parvati basically dragging John and Kevin basically dragging Sandra to the exit. And with $8,000 won, the fastest pair turns out to be Kevin and Sandra. Upon returning from the mission, Peter realizes he's in trouble at the round table. Feeling the pressure, he calls Parvati and Phaedra into the armory to have a strategy discussion about working together, which makes Parvati question Peter's motives, while also freaking Phaedra out, since it's a weird look because she does not want to be involved in any alliances. Now, we learned tonight that there will be no roundtable. Instead, something a little different will be happening. Beginning with Kevin and Sandra, who have won the shields, there will be a safety chain leaving 5 players vulnerable to murder that night. I assume this comes into play as a way to make up for there being no elimination this round, or the last round, which is fine since I'm pretty sure Parvati may have been doomed, and she's my draft pick again, so every episode matters here. Sandra notes she needs to get the most of her side safe, though, and it doesn't seem like it's a very hard conversation when she discusses things with Kevin to save Sheree, which makes MJ feel some type of way because she figured Sandra would be pulling for her, which does seem somewhat important, but we'll see just how important this relationship ends up being in a few episodes. But right now, let's talk about Sheree's decision because she decides to save her fellow housewife, Phaedra, which makes Parvati think that she's about to get saved by Phaedra. However, Phaedra lights up CT's torch, which both makes Parvati question her trust in Phaedra, while also putting CT in a very difficult decision as he now has to decide between friendship or the game. Trishelle has been pleading for someone to save her, feeling like she's doomed, but instead of saving her, CT decides he needs to save John, who is much more important to the faithfuls because he is an obvious faithful, and is a much more obvious faithful than Trishelle is, giving John the final decision as to who will be the last saved from possible murder. John decides to light the torch of Peter, saving him from Parvati's guaranteed murder that night and giving him the slight edge in this war against the traitor. But since Parvati cannot murder herself, this means that Bergie, Kate, MJ, and Trishelle are the sacrificed, who will be left vulnerable to tonight's murder. Now, not one to be outdone for a dramatic moment here, as I've witnessed throughout my 20 years of seeing her on my TV. Trishelle is all sorts of bitter at CT that she didn't get picked, and I'm just like, oh my god, Trishelle, just shut up. And I get what she's feeling, but she's always so dramatic, and I've just always seen her act this way so many times, and I'm just so sorry that CD has to deal with all of this. But can I just say, I think this shows how much growth CT has gone through since his time on The Real World Paris. CT's final evolution as daddy really makes me so happy deep down how maturely he handles these types of situations because you know how easily that animal could come out and just do some damage here. So I'm just very happy to see CT's growth at this point. MJ is also hurt and pissed off, and she's still wearing this outfit, and I just can't take her seriously either. There is definitely some tension between Parvati and Phaedra in the turret that night, with Phaedra telling Parvati that she's either the Ice Princess or the Iron Maiden, needing to become more likable. It definitely seems like they are both kind of on their last leg with each other at this point. Parvati laments over not being able to get rid of Peter, but realizing her best bet might be to target one of Peter's pals, Bertie or Trishelle. And while I'm hoping selfishly after her drama earlier they'll pick Trishelle, I definitely understand that Bergie is much more of an obvious faithful. But will whatever happens help save Parvati? We open episode 8 the next morning at breakfast when we learn that the traitors did not grant a second chance at life for Bergie as they completed the murder they attempted episodes ago. Alan comes in and savagely throws his picture on the floor, which is more attention than Bergie has gotten all season. He survived murder once again, sadly. Trishelle is on one, and strategically, I have to say, she's playing a very smart game for her alliance. She's officially switched on to Phaedra, realizing that Phaedra was being called out by Dan the night he left, also catching on to Phaedra's right eye twitch, which makes me just laugh, because we're talking about Phaedra's eye twitch as a relevant storyline, and that is what this season has become. Realizing how protected Phaedra is, Trishelle voices to Peter and Kevin that they need to use their numbers now to take a shot at her immediately, because if they choose to get rid of the easy target in Parvati, then that means that they may not have the numbers later on to get Phaedra. Peter uses this as an opportunity to make a deal with Parvati to work together, making Parvati realize her only chance now is to support her biggest nemesis and to call a truce. Peter decides they need to work together and shift the target onto Phaedra, which is a brilliant scheme for all parties, Parvati for just staying in the game, and Peter for making an alliance with a known traitor who will now no longer kill him, but he can easily sell her out at the very end game. However, their scheming does not go unnoticed by MJ, who overhears their plans, and this may be their biggest issue with trying to sell Phaedra's name. I would think there would be an effort to try to be a little bit more covert with your strategizing, but I do understand here that they only have so much time to have these conversations, so they are rushing around trying to get things done in a limited amount of time, so we do have to cut them slack at this moment. To our 8th mission, where the contestants are dropped off at a cabin in the woods and are met by legendary Big Brother player Will Kirby, where excited to see him here. Kind of sad that he's never going to play the game, and also kind of sad about some drama that I heard that kind of went on between him and the players afterwards. But you know what? Just gonna stay out of that one here. Now he leads them here hosting this mission where they find the entry to a network of escape tunnels, a map and instructions inside the cabin. Only 5 contestants can enter the tunnel at one at a time, while everyone else has to stay behind to either read the map, control the tunnel lights, and communicate with those underground. Contestants had to locate gold hidden in various parts of the tunnel network, avoid any dead ends, and escape the tunnels through a well within 30 minutes, all while avoiding a range of annoyances both above and underground, meant to gross them out, like spraying water, pits of mud, and most gross of all, lots and lots of bugs. Up to $20,000 could be discovered in one, but for every contestant left in the cabin or the tunnels when time ran out, or for those who chose to exit the cabin door early, $1,000 was deducted from the total. Additionally, a shield will be hidden in one of the tunnels. Deciding on the strategy, CT, John, Parvati, Peter, Sandra, and Trishelle go into the tunnels, while the Bravo Girls and Kevin stay upstairs. The Bravo Girls are clearly hating every minute of this, and there's a trapdoor above Kate. Wait. And there's this pretty lousy moment when Kate is holding onto the lights and then looks up and sees a trapdoor, realizing something bad is about to happen, so she refuses to do it anymore and makes Kevin do it. And it's a smart move because eventually Dr. Will dumps maggots and bugs on him. The bugs enter the main room and MJ immediately bails on the mission. Phaedra can't take it anymore either and takes the opportunity to haggis as well. Drea is trying to stay strong, but eventually even her and Kate get to their breaking point with like 5 minutes left, and they both just quit. I'm just kind of laughing at them, just leaving Kevin all alone to try to get out on his own. Shows how much they really hate Kevin. At this point, Trishelle reminds us that she's one fear factor, and I'm making a mental note like, fuck, Trishelle has gotten so much focus, she's never gonna get murdered now, is she? CT finds a shield and decides to allow Trishelle to get it, knowing that she's probably more vulnerable to leave than he is. I get it, CT. I get it, but just let Trishelle die, please. CT continues to step up because he just goes back to go get Kevin, who was left alone, and helps everybody else escape. With less than a minute left, CT goes back into the tunnel again and snatches another $5,000 gold piece for a total of $15,000 earned. However, because the 4 ladies quit, they deduct $1,000 per lady, meaning $11,000 is added to the pot, while Trishelle keeps her shield a secret between her and CT. Now, before the roundtable, we get a return on investment moment from the previous episode where Parvati tries to complete her full circle manipulation to get John on her side. And they share a pretty real moment from Parvati's perspective where they discuss her perceived coldness, but it turns out from her perspective, she's actually acting, and as we'll later find out, John's moment too. Meanwhile, feeling a lot safer with her shield, Trishelle continues to push all of her shiftiness towards Phaedra, which starts to cause some confusion between everyone as they are ready to take out Parvati, and the sudden shift of Phaedra, while it makes sense to me as an outsider, probably is having a hard time for the majority to hear, who aren't really strategic gamers for the most part. At the roundtable, Parvati starts out saying a very similar argument to what she gave to John, trying to play on everyone's emotions. This allows Trishelle time to bring up and question Phaedra, running over her suspicions again, one by one, to which Phaedra does a pretty good job at countering all her points except for the one about why Dan threw out her name the night he left. E.T. asks John to give his opinion, and after calling Dan the silent slaughterer the night before, deems Parvati the Duchess of Deception and the Mistress of Murder, believing she was truly in cohorts with believing she was truly in cahoots with Dan this entire time as a fellow traitor. He questions why Parvati was not worried at last night's safety chain, and why she seems only worried about banishment versus murder. Trying to get the attention off of Parvati, Peter stirs the conversation back to Phaedra. Kate is very suspect why they keep going for Phaedra, after being so sure that it was Parvati, to which I'm LOLing at Trishelle saying, well, it's because I read my notes again. So convincing, Trishelle. Phaedra calls out Peter, saying that he clearly is making an alliance with Parvati and Phaedra. Meanwhile, Kate keeps speaking up against Peter, saying Dan wasn't actually giving clues for Phaedra, he just sucked at the game, and that's why he's not here. Just like, thank you for coming back, Kate. The votes are cast, and while Kevin, Peter, and Trishelle cast their votes with Parvati against Phaedra because of the twitchy eyes, and while several, including CT, are leaning in that direction as well, Sandra jumps on the opportunity to take out her survival rival, along with CT, John, and the Bravo ladies, meaning sadly my dreams of a Survivor Queen Traitor finale will not come true, as Parvati has finally been banished from the game. I have got to say, for someone who had sus thrown on her from literally the first 5 minutes of the game, Parvati played a damn good Traitors game, and if it was not for that horrible move to support Dan's decision to murder Bergie when you know she knew better, I do believe Parvati could have lasted a lot longer. But sadly, my Black Widow has to exit the castle shortly after revealing that she is their second traitor caught in a row, which is now coming back to get Peter. He had some pretty good strategic schemes up to this point, but it's looking like this could be the one to come back to bite him. Meanwhile, Phaedra makes the lonely walk to the turret alone, where she learns from Alan that she will be given the opportunity to give one faithful an ultimatum to either join them or die. With literally no thought, Phaedra decides to give the ultimatum to Kate, which, after the way Kate supported Phaedra at the last roundtable, makes complete sense, but isn't it almost a little obvious as well too? But we get the end of the episode with Kate locked up in the dungeon as we await her meeting with the last remaining traitor. We begin episode 9 with Kate still in the dungeon, probably enduring the longest 5-minute incarceration of her life, until Phaedra arrives to give Kate her ultimatum. Obviously, Kate says yes because saying no would be dumb, and because we clearly need Kate to have this new storyline this season, so yes, it's Kate becoming a traitor. My first reaction to all of this is kind of hilarious because Kate is so disappointed that only Phaedra is left, and she really doesn't have a plan to go along with. Also, Phaedra is shading Dan, calling him plain toast with no butter, and I'm just loving this whole Phaedra versus Dan side story. Now, this whole sequence is just ascending me because this is the first time we're having a turret meeting without a CBS strategist at the helm, and it is so apparent. I mean, their murder choices in their shortlist literally comes down to either Kevin because he's annoying or Trishelle because she wears funny hats. They're all doomed, but I am loving this. And the next morning, it turns out they decided to kill Kevin, which, I mean, why torture me at this point, putting Trishelle on the short list again and making her enter last and not even get rid of her? I mean, instead, you're getting rid of my man candy on the cast, the cheek, the nerve, the audacity, the gall, and the gumption. I'm just gonna take this quick moment to mourn for Kevin. I mean, he was so hot. I mean, if only he had never spoke to anyone or said anything. Also, can we just talk about how he died because he was annoying? That is actually kind of iconic. Before everyone enters, MJ calls Kate out, feeling like Kate's not acting like herself. And I'm laughing here at Kate saying this is why she doesn't smoke marijuana anymore because she gets too paranoid. Now, there's also another funny moment where John has nothing to say for Kevin's toast. I mean, I think they all hated him. I mean, even members of his own alliance don't seem to have anything to say for him. Now, meanwhile, the talk is between Peter and Phaedra, as John and Trishelle realize they need to get 2 out of CT, MJ, or Sandra to flip to their side. At our next mission, our final 9 each has a stained glass window with their name on it. They then have to take turns to fire from a crossbow at a window of their choice. The contestant's task was to shatter all the windows except one. Whoever's window was left standing would win a shield. In the meantime, each missed crossbow shot before this was accomplished would cost the group $250 from a starting pot of $2,500. Now, everybody is losing a lot of money, but Phaedra brings up the strategy to keep the bill where it's at, to try small changes to hit where it's at already, with Sandra also agreeing to. So, they first try the strategy on Sheree, and it works out with MJ getting their first hit. Phaedra moves it slowly up to hit Peter, knocking him out, strategically getting rid of a big threat. CT moves it slowly to one side, knocking out Phaedra. Then they take out MJ and Sandra, moving up to hit CT in the top section of the grid. As of right now, the only top section, and Trishelle, who is in the bottom right hand corner, are left, meaning it should be easy as moving it up to hit CT, then across to knock out the last 2, leaving Trishelle with the shield. Obviously, this is not what I want to have happen, so I'm very thankful when they miss a bunch of shots at CT, which prompts Sandra to make the suggestion to Phaedra to bring the crossbow down to target Trishelle instead, which pisses off Trishelle and sets alarm bells off in CT's head as to why they would move the target to get rid of Trishelle, unless they wanted her vulnerable to be murdered. They decide not to move the crossbow from where it's aimed and take out Trishelle, then move it up to hit Kate, leaving only CT and John left. It's CT's turn next, so obviously he's not going to hit himself, and instead hits John, knocking him out. winning $15,250 for the pot and the shield for CT. But CT also sits in a position where he now truly suspects Phaedra and Sandra, not sure how to bring this up at all. Prior to the roundtable, it's still between Peter and Phaedra. Peter's strategy is to separate Phaedra from the other Bravo girls so he doesn't have a chance to influence them, and when he does, then Trishelle goes in for the kill, attempting to turn them and Sandra against Phaedra. MJ makes it clear at this point that she's not here to just be blindly loyal to the girls, but it also doesn't seem like Trishelle makes too much progress with them as well. CT, however, cannot get over what happened at the challenge and why both Phaedra and Sandra switched the target to Trishelle. CT commits to Trishelle that he's on board with getting rid of Phaedra, meaning literally at this point anyone could go and there's just so much tension in the air. On the eve of their 7th banishment, John makes the first comment, attempting to voice his opinion that they need to target Philo Phaedra, and if she does not leave, then he will be the one murdered tomorrow. Phaedra defends herself, saying that Peter was the one truly working with Dan and Parvati since he admitted to working deals with them both. So of course Dan and Parvati voted for her because they were all working together to frame her, saying that she doesn't have to kiss Peter's ass for a rose. CT calls his sus about what happened at the mission and why Phaedra moved the crossbow to hit Trishelle. However, Kate is speaking out in defense of Phaedra. The votes are read one by one, with the Bravo girls plus Sandra voting for Peter, while Peter's pals and CT vote for Phaedra, leading MJ as the swing vote. And the credits start to roll on us as MJ gets ready to reveal her vote that breaks the 4-4 tie. At the start of episode 10, when MJ flips her vote around, it reads Peter, who is a faithful, which you can see knowingly shakes MJ and Sheree as they are starting to really process things around them. And let me just say, I am very impressed with the way Peter played this game. Was not expecting to become a Peter fan, especially after knowing his time on The Bachelor, but talk about redemption stories here, Peter. Way to go. Wouldn't mind seeing him play in another season if they happen to do an All-Stars anytime soon. Meanwhile, leaving the roundtable, John starts to come to terms that he will likely be leaving on his way out, and Sandra and Sheree try to piece things together with Phaedra, where Phaedra tries to wonder why CT switched so suddenly, but you could tell that things with the Bravo girls are not as hunky-dory as we thought. At the turret meeting, Kate says that she wants to stay loyal to her fellow Bravo girls, but not sure how much more she can stick her neck out to support Phaedra. Knowing it's a numbers game, Phaedra doesn't feel like she can kill either of the Bravo girls as well, so obviously it's either CT, John, or Trishelle. Y'all keep making me think that you're gonna kill Trishelle, so I know it won't be her, so I assume it will either be CT or John here. There is a lot of attention as to who will come into breakfast the next morning since there's only 2 more murders left at this point. It is whittled down to just John and Trishelle, and of course, I'm not going to get my hopes up and just assume Trishelle is going to make it through. And of course, she does, meaning that John, our master manipulator of language, has been successfully slayed, which is like, how did this guy last this long? He was literally the most obvious faithful I've ever seen and would have been one of the first people I would have murdered personally. CT is the only guy left in the house now, and I love this for CT because he's definitely my favorite guy on this cast. He has been so much fun this season. Meanwhile, the Bravo girlies have had their meeting, and MJ is very clear they need to kill Phaedra. But Sheree is sympathetic to Phaedra. However, Kate tries to throw doubt into it by throwing some shade onto Sandra. Trishelle tries to counter it by calling the 3 out, which turns out to be very much so nothing. Shocking. I know I hate on Trishelle a lot, but I don't feel like she brings anything but worthless drama other than the Phaedra eye twitch here. And you know what? That's just a personal opinion. Y'all are allowed to like her if you do, but meh, meh. All I can do is make sounds of disappointment when I think of her. At our 10th mission, the 7 contestants left had to dig up golden nuggets from a huge pile of dirt worth $150 each. They then have to cross a series of floating platforms to the other side of the pond and deposit the nuggets on a plate of a balance beam scale. On the plate of a balance scale, they have 20 minutes digging. On the plates of a balance scale, they have 20 minutes to dig up, transport, and deposit as many nuggets as they can, with up to $30,000 worth of gold hidden in the dirt. And any gold dropped to the water is lost forever. The shield is also hidden in the dirt, which could be banked by depositing it on the balance scale as well. Phaedra gets really annoyed because everyone is cheering her on while she's trying to go, and she just wants everyone to be quiet, so she falls in her first attempt. Everyone is looking for the shield first and foremost, and MJ finds it. She has to get it across, and everyone is doing so bad at this. CT and Trisha are the only ones seemingly able to make it across, which is to be expected given their background with the challenge. With only 1 minute left, MJ makes one final attempt to get the shield across. Not to say that she'd really be murdered by Kate or Phaedra, but you do have to applaud the effort because no one else but the challenge competitors have made it across so far. So, when MJ makes it to the final platform with 5 seconds left and secures the shield, she guarantees herself the first spot in the final 5, since she's likely not going to be murdered tonight. And I have to say, MJ's edit didn't necessarily give me a possible winner, but nothing this season has been expected at all, so, get it, girl. Not only that, but they managed to basically get the $30,000 as $28,350 is added to the final prize pot. Getting into the penultimate roundtable, it seems like there's very little question as Phaedra is the name on everyone's lips. However, trying to think one step ahead, Kate attempts to get everyone to go after the second traitor, hoping to save Phaedra as an easy option to banish tomorrow. And her opinion is that Sandra is the second traitor. Sandra clocks Kate, pushing very hard, and goes outside to join the conversation that Kate is having with CT and MJ to figure out who her second suspect is, and this kind of ends there. Heading into the next roundtable, MJ has a very concerning confessional where she says she does not know if the traitor is Phaedra or Sandra, and I'm like, oh no, please, not Sandra. And why do MJ and Sheree not feel fully developed? Why only CT and Trishelle do? And I'm just like, oh, this is disgusting. I don't want a Trishelle win. Anyway, throughout the process here, Phaedra kind of concedes to everything that seems like it's happening here that it's probably going to be her. She says she's just tired of fighting and doesn't want to defend herself anymore, and unfortunately, there's just no way out as the writing is on the wall. Everyone votes for Phaedra, who I actually think could have won had it not been for Dan throwing her name out. She played so brilliantly up to that point, and it literally did not have her name at all in anybody's mouths. Kate senses Phaedra's resignation and realizes that she needs to play the game for herself, but she makes a comment about Phaedra saying she's selfish more than skillful, which gets some eyes at her. Phaedra throws one last cloud of suspicion onto CT, saying she's there for girl power, which really makes me hope that Kate kills Trishelle at the end so they target CT versus her going CT is the last man. But, if CT goes, I would hate it because it would make sense since I hate Trishelle and she's ruining everything I love in this series, and it just starts all the way back before Peppermint, which is why I'm hashtag justice for Peppermint and hashtag take up the trash before this endgame. Spoiler alert, not going to get anything that I want this season, but that's fine, it is still an entertaining. This sets the stage for our finale. For the first time in my watch history, we only have one traitor in this finale, but for the first time ever, this traitor will get to make at least one last murder. Kate is banking all of this on selling the final traitor is Sandra, but we end the finale with Sandra questioning Kate why Phaedra is so selfish, because for Sandra, Kate attacking Phaedra doesn't make any sense to her, unless she's a traitor. And suddenly, this season finale is entirely up for grabs. Will Kate's comeback come full circle, starting with her being constantly accused as a traitor only to result in her win as a recruited traitor? Or can any mixture of CT, MJ, Sandra, Sheree, and sadly Trishelle manage to piece things together in time? We begin the season finale with Kate's turret decision, learning that she has narrowed things down once again to Trishelle just because she's the faithful with 9 lives, or Sheree because her going might put more sus onto Sandra, as the housewives may not be seen as strategically smart to kill each other. I fully expected Kate to try to make a strategic decision here because it feels like it would be the obvious decision to take out Trishelle, and that has never happened just yet, so I was not shocked at all to see Sheree leave the game. Sheree does say she believes Kate was the final traitor, which could just be hindsight for her, but I do have a feeling she was a lot smarter than we probably gave her credit for, as she was likely under-edited just due to the way she left this game with no consequences whatsoever. This leaves our final 5 of CT, Kate, MJ, Sandra, and Trishelle, and to some degree, it feels like the challengers are on one side with the Bravo girlies on the other, as we see Sandra attempt to play sides between them. Sandra and MJ have also had an under-edited relationship as well too, that has slightly been pointed out, but we also learned that MJ is highly sus to Sandra as well, likely because she's sipping on that Kate Kool-Aid. The game's final mission, the finalists are airlifted by helicopter to a seaside mountain trail where they must follow a marked path to a boat and raise its flag within 1 hour. There are detours along the way that, if completed, will yield an additional money for the pot. The challenge is rather dramatic as it seems like CT once again is the only one really capable of doing much. Trishelle especially seems pretty useless, which is kind of surprising, but ultimately they are able to complete all detours before raising the final flag in the last 20 seconds. I still don't believe this clock for this mission, as the first season it just seems like there is just here for the dramatics, as they always seem to manage to complete things with like 10 seconds left, like yeah right. Now, during the mission, Sandra tries to lock it in with Trishelle that the plan is for them, CT, and MJ to all vote for Kate at the next roundtable and lock in a final four of faithfuls. However, after speaking with Kate in the car, CT immediately becomes sus of everyone who isn't Trishelle, not willing to go to the end with anyone but her. There is a moment where Sandra realizes that she may not fully have CT either, causing her to attempt to go to Kate and MJ to find safety and possibly get rid of CT. All of this last minute scrambling comes back to get Sandra at the next roundtable, as it's clear that MJ is not fully trusting of Sandra. Everything gets worse for her too when CT realizes that he only has one path forward as well, suddenly shifting his sus onto Sandra, which throws Trishelle completely off her guard, as they had not discussed changing the plan. Despite all of the drama and what seems like an obvious vote for Kate, no one decides to take any chances on Sandra, with her sadly being banished in a unanimous vote. Sandra reveals she was the fiercest faithful of the season, and CBS fans around the world collectively cry that our queen will not be taking home the win despite playing one of the strongest games in the castle. This means we enter the endgame with CT, Kate, MJ, and Trishelle as they one by one enter the courtyard to make their final decisions in the game, as they will now continue to banish until they believe there are no traitors left in the game or until only two players are left standing. In their first decision, I am completely shocked as Kate throws a green pouch to the fire, attempting to end the game. Like, who's gonna believe that, Kate? No one believes her either, as they all quickly toss red pouches into the fire and name her as their vote for banishment. Seemingly giving up like Phaedra did, Kate reveals she was indeed a traitor, which is sad. The writing was on the wall, so I don't blame her demeanor, and I do understand why she would be so frustrated to come back and lose in the second to last vote once again. Now, I say second to last vote because our final three now have to vote once more. MJ feels so excited to end the game with her fellow faithfuls, but she has the face crack of the millennium when both CT and Trishelle throw red into the fire again. I mean, look at her face. They are ready to enact their plan of becoming the final two of the game. However, Trishelle being Trishelle, something is not sitting right with her, and it seems like things are a lot more difficult for her all of a sudden. So here we are at the final banishment of the game, and they read their votes one by one. CT first voting for MJ, which MJ next votes for Trishelle. And just when you think things can't get any more dumb, they do, as Trishelle votes for CT. I told y'all, Trishelle's the worst. Like, she's clearly stuck on his decision to want to oust Sandra, which was the smartest move if the idea was to get both of them to the final two. And then she brings up the fact that CT lit John's torch instead of her. I'm just like, girl, you just look like a selfish fool right now. What are you doing? Thankfully, CT keeps his calm and gets her to see the light. And in the revote, Trishelle decides to change her vote, meaning in a shocking endgame vote, MJ leaves the castle in third place, even though she was a faithful. I was not a huge fan of hers, I won't lie, but she did provide us with some great moments, and MJ did seem a little bit more switched on towards the end, so I've got to say seeing her get cut right at the end, just because, is equal parts hilarious and tragic, and is such an amazing way to end this game. I'm not really a fan of bitter MJ at the reunion, so let's just move on from her. So when the dust settles, it is the challenges CT Tamburello and Trishelle Cantanella who walk away with the first faithful victory in the Traitors US history and share the $208,000 grand prize. I am extremely happy for CT just because he was such a workhorse the entire season, and I've been such a fan for his for so long. And while I will never forgive what she did to Peppermint, I suppose I could give Trishelle her flowers for having some strong intuitions as well. We learn a little bit more at the reunion, such as the fact that Phaedra really connected with Trishelle, which is why she wanted to see her win and never murdered. So, socially, it seems like Trishelle learned from her past self to become the best version of herself. So, we stand growth, but I still stand by the fact that her last minute move to take out CT was either bad acting or just really, really selfish decision making. But, I would not put it past Trishelle to do either. So, thank you for that ending, and thank you for making the right choice ultimately in the end. But wow, what a nuts ride this season was. This cast was so strong from start to finish that even Dan's mid-season destruction of the Traitors couldn't stop it from having a great ending. While I'm not completely satisfied with the boot order, as I would have loved to see an endgame with Peppermint, Janelle, and Parvati, I would be lying if non-gamers did not make a name for themselves in this season. Phaedra will no doubt be this season's Rob Goddess and MVP, and the showrunners really need to find a way to stop what happened to a gamer such as her when she had literally no sus from her, and getting randomly called out somewhere in the middle by a wounded traitor just doesn't still seem right or sit well with me, and I don't think it sits well with a lot of the viewing public as well. However, we also cannot forget some other great moves here in the season, such as Peter's brilliant shield move that allowed the Faithfuls to really gain the upper hand, and it all ending with the shockful Faithful on Faithful drama. I think the hype was truly real, y'all. The Traitors US2 will easily be up for contention for the best reality TV show of this year, and I'm so excited and ready to see what this show is going to bring to the table next season. Hopefully, we'll get one sooner than next year, but also if we're only getting one a year, that'll be great too, because we won't get any sort of franchise fatigue, considering we do have a whole bunch of other countries also with their own Traitors franchise as well that we can check out during the year. So hopefully the Traitors won't become the next Drag Race, but would kind of still love it in the short term if it did. So what are y'all thinking? Were you just as hyped for the season as I was? Sound off in the comments below, and let's keep that tea spilling, y'all. That being said, this is Renegade signing out, and I'll see you next time. Bye!